morning, everyone. My name is Tracey Knowlton. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's FASD webcast, PCAP 101 for Supervisors, part of a monthly series of webcasts relating to FASD. This webcast is part of an FASD Cross-Ministry Committee's initiative and 10-year FASD strategy to provide accessible educational sessions that cover a broad range of topics that are accessible to all Albertans. For more information about this series, check your emails for our regular updates or go to csslearningseries.ca or by following us on Twitter at AlbertaCSS. You will be able to pose your questions via our live chat window, and we will address as many of these questions as we can at the end of the presentation. Nicole is our online moderator. She'll pose your web chat questions during the Q&A period at the end. Now, today's session is also being recorded, and the video will be posted on the Alberta FASD website about 2 weeks after this live session. Let's get started. Today we are hoping to cover the PCAP basics, client eligibility, theoretical framework, PCAP site structure, staff responsibilities, and some other special considerations. The goal of PCAP is to prevent future births of alcohol and/or drug-exposed children. We achieve this by addressing a mother's needs, meeting the women where they're at, helping them to make meaningful changes in their lives. So the goal is beyond the current pregnancy, creating stability in the woman's life, make the focus of this program is unique in that the focus of our work is on our mothers, on the women, and not on the children. But through the work that we do with mums, we directly impact the lives of these children. And I feel like that's really, really important. So
just a lot of people don't really know the beginnings of PCAP, where it started. So it's based out of a program in Washington, and it started actually as a research project in the 1980s when cocaine was a really big issue. And they were seeing the impact of cocaine use by mothers on their children, and they were doing research around some of the impacts of that on the children. And through that period of time, as they were working and following up with these families, they started to recognize that the mothers often were not around or were seriously in trouble or had actually passed away. So they started to really look at what are we doing and how can we support these women in a more effective way so that the children are also benefited. So in 1991 actually is when the first research project started for PCAP in Seattle, Washington. And since that time, it's continued on and grown. They now have replica sites in many places in Washington. It was brought to Alberta actually in 1999. That was when the first programs were started. There was 2 programs in Edmonton, 1 in Calgary, and shortly after that a few other programs opened up as well, Lakeland being one of them. For a lot of years that was really all there was in terms of PCAP supports in the province. Then the government took on the initiative of PCAP as the method of choice in terms of working with these women and trying to prevent and have impact on FASD. And so it was around 2007 the strategic plan was developed in the province, and basically there was funding that was given to programs in the province to begin running PCAP model work. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. Anyway, as that work evolved, we now have come to the point of having over 30 PCAP programs in the province of Alberta. It also, the PCAP Council itself evolved out of this initiative from the strategic plan as well. So the hope was that we could give supports to the new programs starting up and that we could have fidelity to the model of PCAP, because it's really a very specific model of work. And there are very specific things that we do in terms of the work that we do. So just as what you're seeing on the screen is a map of some of the sites across Alberta, and basically really shows the expansion and that we broadly cover the entire province. So PCAP is really unique in that it's adaptable. So it can be run in urban settings, it can be run in rural settings. They're just modifications that need to happen to meet the needs of the people. So just in general, what we know of the women and basic characteristics is that these women come from very traumatic backgrounds. They've often been abused as children. They've experienced significant trauma, family history of abuse, domestic violence, things like that. So substance use often becomes a way of coping with the grief and trauma that they're dealing with. And that the women themselves often live very chaotic lives. So when they enter into our program, they're often homeless. They're struggling with addiction issues. They don't have any funding or way of financing, so they rely on the generosity of people or even people that take advantage of them. That's how they get by day to day. So these women are really vulnerable. They don't have a lot of trust in systems. It's very hard for them to trust people in general. And that's one of the reasons why PCAP is really effective, is that it's a long-term support, relationship-based working with women.
So we need to make sure that we're remembering that preventing drug and alcohol exposed births is our primary goal. So we have to either motivate a woman to stop drinking or using during her pregnancy, or help a woman who cannot stop using to avoid becoming pregnant. Now, we have to make sure that we're well aware of working with women who are substance using, to make sure that when we're working with women, giving them all the options that are available to them. Seeking women-centered treatment is really important. Often, like Tammi said, our women come from serious abuse and domestic violence and child sexual abuse, so we need to make sure that in order for them to heal, that they're getting women-centered treatment. Also to ensure that we're looking for treatment centers that will help them take their children. We need to make sure that we're staying in touch while they're in treatment so that they know that there's still someone on their side. We arrange child visitation if it's possible at all at the treatment center. We maintain our connections with the other service providers to let them know where they are in treatment, how they're doing in treatment, to make sure that there's a good after plan in place so that some things that might be necessary at the end of treatment don't fall through the cracks. And to help arrange post-treatment housing if it's necessary. Often the biggest deal is a woman won't go to treatment because she won't be able to afford her rent while she's in treatment, and she'll lose her housing. So we need to make sure that we have all our bases covered before she goes to treatment. And then after treatment, we need to recognize that relapse is a part of recovery, and to let her know that just because she's relapsed means that she won't get kicked out of PCAP, that you know, we're still going to be there for her no matter how bad it gets for her. And to help her to create a plan in the event that she feels like she's going to relapse. So whatever that looks like for a particular client, to put a list on the fridge to say, you know, before I can go and use, I have to make sure that there's someone safe to leave my children with, that they have diapers, that they have milk, they have food. And oftentimes before they get to the end of the list, end of the little checklist, they say, oh, it's not worth it. And then hopefully they won't relapse. We need to be clear, and this means the entire PCAP team, supervisors, mentors, and program managers, to ensure that everyone is aware of different types of family planning, knowing what's available in your community. If there is a female sexual health nurse that someone can take a client to, that's really helpful. We need to discuss those family planning methods as a team to ensure that staff gain confidence in talking about family planning and family planning methods. It is not for us to make a decision for a woman whether or not she chooses to terminate a pregnancy. That needs to be her decision, but we need to make sure that she is getting all the options. And if you're not comfortable giving her those options, then you need to find someone who is comfortable giving her those options. Stay educated on all the methods and all the new and upcoming methods of birth control and family planning, to make sure that if there are risks involved, that you're making sure that she knows what the risks are involved with using a particular method. And making sure that you're not telling the client what to do or pushing her to do a particular thing, but to offer the options and the choices that are available to her in a meaningful, non-judgmental way.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the enrollment criteria, or what circumstances women are in when they enter into our program. So one of the first things is that, generally speaking, the woman has either recently delivered her baby within the last 6 months or is currently pregnant, is acknowledging some form of alcohol or drug use. And I know sometimes that confuses people because it's a fetal alcohol prevention model in terms of the strategic plan, but we recognize often, because alcohol is a societal, is accepted in our society, that people don't see that as a problem, but yet they'll acknowledge drug use. And we know hand in hand they quite often go together. The other thing is that we also know drug use can have serious impacts with children as well, and their well-being, whether it's the stability of their lives or whether it's on the actual child as it's developing. The other criteria is that the woman, generally speaking, is not well connected to resources. So that's one of the things we've really learned over the years, is that a lot of times women can have many supports in place for them and there are people that they can go to, but if they don't reach out to them, if they don't trust them, if they don't know how to access them, those resources really don't do a lot. So one of the primary goals of the program is to really help women become effectively connected to community service providers. So those are the three primary criteria for entering into the program. We also have secondary, and Tracey was going to invite her up here to speak a little bit about this as well. One of the things that we also know in terms of enrollment criteria is sometimes they're not currently pregnant, but they may have delivered a child in the past that has been diagnosed with an FASD, or that they're still drinking and they're of childbearing age. Where that secondary enrollment criteria becomes a little complicated is in the province itself. And I'll have Tracey speak a little bit to the rural experience, because that's where her work is really at. And I'll talk about our urban experience. Within the cities, often the demand for our supports really doesn't allow us to accept women under the secondary criteria, that there is such a need for the support that we really focus on the main three criteria, that they're pregnant, currently substance using, and not well connected. Tracey will talk a little bit about some of the secondary methods and how women enter into the programs and some of the other
Yeah, I think for new sites this may be more important, and that is that what we found at Lakeland was that we were bringing children in for diagnosis to the clinic and realizing that perhaps mom was still in the cycle of childbearing and still in the cycle of addiction, and that's how we got kind of built up our client base in the beginning. I think the risk of doing a lot of that is that you run the risk of loading up the program with women who have had children previously, and then you're full and have a waiting list for women who are pregnant. So I think there needs to be a good balance to make sure that you're not just loading your program just to get clients. Tammi and I we did discuss that. But also, I think we need to be really aware of women who are bringing their children in for diagnosis and making sure that they're well supported and that are well connected to community services if that's available to them.
And I think the other part of that too is sometimes new programs in communities, as they're trying to build their awareness in the community and they start taking on clients, sometimes that, exactly as Tracey said, is what happens is they begin to take on a lot of clients, many of which might meet the secondary methods. But as this is a 3-year program, it's really important that you not be in too much of a hurry as a new program to build a full caseload and allow the community and the supports to be there where they're most needed, for sure. Just basically, we have a few common questions that come up often. Just in general about that is how flexible is the enrollment criteria? What if we are a new site and just starting out? And I actually just spoke to that. That's kind of funny. And how do we clearly communicate the enrollment criteria to other agencies? Ooh, I went too far. Sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. How do we communicate the enrollment criteria to other agencies so they make appropriate referrals? And that quite often is a big challenge. You know, and we struggle right now in Edmonton. One of the biggest challenges we have is that referrals we get often, you know, they're women that meet the criteria because they might be pregnant and they're substance using, but the woman's primary goal is housing. She's homeless. And we get referrals from people and they're sending them to us because we can help them with housing. And the message gets really confused. People think that, oh, you guys provide housing. So what happens is the women come into our program because that's what they've been told by the referring agency. And we don't provide housing. We really support them as best as we can to get connected, to find resources. And what happens sometimes, if that's what the referring person has told them, they get frustrated because we're not meeting their needs, and we end up losing connection with these women. They end up not continuing in the program. And so it really is important that you do the work and the groundwork in your community to really help them understand the full piece of PCAP and to help them understand the importance of relaying that to women so that they're not coming into the program with unclear expectations, and that creates frustrations. Sorry, I gotta go this way. Okay, I'm gonna have Tracey come up and talk about screening referrals.
I know that we've had it happen in Cold Lake where we had clients come in be referred in and expecting us to get them AISH. You know, those are unrealistic expectations, and they definitely need to be cleared up in most communities. When we're talking about screening referrals, pardon me, is the woman eligible for PCAP based on the enrollment criteria? So that's following those last two ways that women can enter into PCAP. If she's not, what do? Well, you need to refer her to good, solid connections in the community where she can get what it is she needs, but you know, that isn't going to come from PCAP, that isn't coming from using up mentors' time. If she is eligible and she can be located and she does accept service, then you know, she needs to be assigned to a mentor. If she is unable to be located or unwilling to accept services, it is most imperative that you let the referral source know that she has, you have tried everything to locate her, and that you've made note to that, and that you also, or that she just refuses service. Excuse me. And you let them know that, you know, this is what you've done to locate her, what you've done to bring her into program, and you do the best you can. You can't make anybody be a part of PCAP. It's a voluntary program, and that needs to be really clear to referral sources as well. You also need to be really clear with women that they do not get kicked out of PCAP. They do not get kicked out of PCAP if their pregnancy ends for any reason, whether it's a termination or whether a miscarriage or, you know, something tragic happens to that baby. That if she relapses, if she, you know, tells you to take a hike, it doesn't matter. You don't kick her out. You do the best you can. You figure out how to work with her, and you work around the things that are seemingly barriers to you or to her. and you make sure that you're getting and giving frequent supervision so that all progress is monitored on that woman and what you're doing with her, and that the outcomes are according to the PCAP protocols. You want to make sure that supervisors that you're meeting with your mentors in individual supervision and group staffing regularly. Now, I know that in Seattle it's weekly, and I know that that's unrealistic in some rural sites. So twice monthly, whether that looks like one staff meeting and one individual supervision, or individual supervision and a call-in the following week, however you do it, you have to make it work for your program. That real attention is given to what the progress is in that client. Because if you're just moving from chaos to chaos and not figuring out a way to move her forward in her progress and in her life, that you're not doing, you're not making any headway with her, and you're not helping her. Even if there's a conflict with a mentor and a client, she won't be asked to leave the program. And if it's not available that she can have another mentor, then perhaps maybe a mediation with the supervisor and the mentor might be in order. And you just want to make sure that respect is given, and that, that it's also expected, that you won't be treated poorly either. The 3-year program is ideal because it takes time for women to build trust. It takes time for women to move toward her self-determined goals, and to even recognize what those goals may be for her. We need to know that we're moving women from dependence to interdependence, and we'll talk a little bit about that. That mentors guide and assist clients through their goals, not putting their goals or what they see as the needs are for that client on her. We need to make sure that we're moving clients towards managing their own lives. And, I know that they've survived without us in the past, and they'll survive again, but we want them to have better lives. That's the goal for all of us. The complexity of our clients' lives requires those clients to be connected to many diverse resources. So to lots of community agencies throughout PCAP, so that at the end she has other places to go. It doesn't mean that you'll never be there for her. It just means that she'll have other people, other tools in her toolkit. Now the 3-year program, this time frame is a bit negotiable, particularly when you have clients who are not necessarily moving forward in the way that we would like. So, there is some ability to be flexible at the end of the program. If they need a little bit of time, then we can, have some wiggle room to allow them a bit more time to move forward. In some sites, it may not be possible to have all the resources outside of PCAP, and so it makes it really important to have that little bit of wiggle room so that you can add some time at the end of the program where they can feel like more comfortable with moving forward in their lives and being comfortable in their own lives. Okay. Oh, sorry. Also, when we're talking about PCAP, this slide that you're seeing now, what we want to do is, oftentimes women have burned bridges and disconnected from services that were really important to them. So what we need to do is really look at the woman's circle of support, and how do we reconnect her to those things? How do we connect her to services she may not even know she needs? And to be clear, just because there may be someone in her circle of support that we don't feel belongs there, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be there at that particular time. It may come down the road where a woman realizes, oh, I don't think I want this person in my life anymore, and that's a conversation you'll have then. But far be it for us to judge who belongs in a person's life. And, we all have judgments, and a woman may say to you, oh, I'm gonna, I want my partner included in my circle of support. And in your head, you may think, I don't think this is such a good idea. You know, there's domestic violence, he's a drug user or a drug dealer or whatever. You need to make sure that having those judgments, let yourself know that that's okay, but that we don't want to put that judgment on our clients in any way. And making sure that even if you have the judgment in your gut, you don't want to let it get to your face because she'll see it. And nobody likes to be judged.
So one of the really unique things about the PCAP programs is that we really, truly do meet women where they're at. And I know we hear that a lot in social service work and we hear that in different services, but what we know is that with these women, if they feel judged, as Tracey said, if they feel like you're expecting more of them than where they're ready to be at, the work just simply isn't going to be effective. So successful mentors are willing to flex their thinking, as it says. You need to be able to, I think flexibility is one of the strongest aspects of a mentor and a program actually, is that you need to be able to have the conversations about what this woman is wanting for herself. You need to be able to be flexible and aware of resources to support her where she's at. And when she's ready to make change, I think that's the biggest thing that we really need to recognize, is that effective mentors don't push for change, they support a woman to be ready for change, and that's a really significant difference. And sometimes it's just a subtle shift in the mentor's perspective. And that's where a supervisor's role is really, really important. Sometimes they get so close. They work with these women for up to 3 years. They develop strong relationships with these women. And sometimes it's really hard for the mentors to have perspective. A supervisor's role is to help them take a step back and to really shift the way they're thinking, to be able to see what the woman is needing and wanting, and then to be able to work forward from there. PCAP has a two-pronged approach in terms of how we do the work that we do. So basically the mentor is working on two levels. So on one level, they're supporting the client herself. We're working to support her to create healthy networks with her families and other natural supports. But equally as important is the relationship that we build with community service providers. And as you see, as we talk through the program, we don't do the addiction counseling. We don't do the grief and loss counseling. We don't do the family planning counseling. That we really are seen as a connector, or the person that really helps this woman get connected to those people in her life that will really help her. So the relationship you develop in your community with the service providers that are out there, whether that's regarding housing, addiction supports, healthcare services, relationships with your local doctors, clinics, the more we can educate and support our service providers to understand the challenges that the women face, the better it is for everybody. The relationship can be built and there can be a much more steady progress towards positive change. And it's really, I love this slide because it says very clearly, it doesn't matter how many resources you have. If you don't know how to use them, they will never be enough. And really, sometimes that's the experience that we have. Women will come into our program and they'll have 10 different people working with them. And they say, oh, well, I have a worker for this. And they quite often just get overwhelmed and confused. And they don't know who to ask for what. They don't know how to work through conflict if they have it. And so quite often, they'll have a communication they don't like with a resources service provider, and then they step away from it and they lose that contact. So one of the biggest roles that we have as a support to these women is to help them to understand who are the people in their lives and how can they best connect and build relationship with them so that the work can be effective. So we're going to move on now to talk a little bit about the theoretical framework of PCAP. And one of the things is that I would like, we didn't say at the very beginning, that's unique about our PCAP programs in Alberta from Seattle, and I'll start there, is that Seattle started with one research project and one program, and then they've expanded and they have what are called replica sites. So those sites follow the model 100%, and they do exactly the same things at all the same sites in terms of the ratio of clients and the way they do their paperwork and their administration. And it's very much research-based. It's effective, and it does what it needs to do. It became a little bit different in Alberta, and some people don't really know the subtle differences, but we don't have replica sites in Alberta. Each PCAP site we follow a basic framework of PCAP model, but each site has adapted to meet the needs in their community, and each site has to work under their own agency, and so that creates some of its own challenges. So what I do at Catholic Social Services here in Edmonton might be slightly different than what they have to do at McMahon in Calgary or Lakeland. So, you know, that's one of the beautiful things about what's happened in Alberta is that we have this core framework and teaching of PCAP, but we've modified it and adapted it to our unique challenges. Alberta is very diverse, and so what's happening in Edmonton is not what's happening in High Level and not what's happening necessarily in Medicine Hat. And sometimes the differences or even in what substances are the big issue. So you might have crack cocaine being an issue in one community and crystal meth being more of an issue in another community. So the model allows us to be flexible, but we do try to hold to some very basic things. So what we're going to talk a little bit about is the three core frameworks, theoretical frameworks, the relational theory, harm reduction, and stages of change. So I'm going to invite Tracey up to talk about relational theory.
Relational theory is extraordinarily important to PCAP, and probably what I would feel would be the most important piece of PCAP and the mentor-PCAP client relationship. Because women's sense of connectedness to others is central and critical to her growth, her development, and her definition of self. I know it says that on the slide. I can't stress this enough. It is really important that you build that relationship with your clients. We need to show her what positive connections and positive relationships look like. For the most part, our clients have never had those. The good thing about PCAP, the intervention is longer, so it lasts 3 years or more, and you have time to develop that really close relationship. Relationships enhance women's growth, their development, their positive sense of self, and the quality of that relationship might have a greater influence on change for her than any treatment method that we put in front of her. It can also determine the success of her time in PCAP. And this is a parallel process that takes in all the aspects of PCAP and is supported from the team leader, the supervisor, the mentor, and the client. So the strengths of these relationships within the PCAP team also extends out to the service providers and stakeholders. That goes back to saying if we don't develop really good relationships with the service providers outside of PCAP so that we can attach our clients to those service providers, we're doing her a disservice. We're directly doing her a disservice. We want her to see that what collaboration looks like. What does it look like to work, have a good working relationship with other service providers? And I know that that's not always easy, but remember that you're a role model, and that we need to make sure that we're putting good stuff out there, make sure that that she sees what it is to be in relationship, and whether it be a working relationship or a positive role model relationship that you're building with her. Pardon me. You need to make sure that we have good communication, that you're being present, that you're staying engaged, avoiding interruptions, making sure that you're using those I statements, I, me, my, and making sure that when you're speaking with your client or you're speaking with a service provider in front of your client, that your body language is open, that you're not scowling or crossing your arms or putting your hands on your hips, things like that that show kind of aggression. You want to make sure that you're not making judgments, even though sometimes that's really difficult. Making sure that when you're having a conversation with your client and she's telling you something but you're not quite understanding, tell her, I don't quite understand, or I hear you saying this, just to make sure that you're in ownership of your thoughts and your feelings, and making sure that it's okay for her to be in ownership of her thoughts and her feelings. You want to make sure that you're allowing her to express her ideas and thoughts without feeling, even if it's anger or being anxious, without judgment. You know, she may feel threatened by your relationship. I know that as a bigger woman, some of the clients felt a little threatened by me. We got past it, but it happens. And that you want to provide ongoing support past whatever issues you come up against, that you're super sensitive to things that are going on in her life, whether you agree with what's going on in her life or not, that you want to make sure that you're not passing judgment, that you're just being supportive. I know that we're all going to have experiences, or we've all had experiences in the past where clients have done everything they can to break down the relationship. And you just keep saying, you know what, when you're ready, you can call me, I'll be here for you, no matter what. You want to move clients in a supportive way towards their being, I know that in Seattle they talk about independence, from dependence to interdependence to independence, and I believe we're all interdependent, and that's something that the PCAP trainers have adopted, that interdependence is way more important than being independent, no man is an island. We want to know, we want to make sure that we're aware of all the outcomes, good or bad, that may come from a decision that she makes, and give her all those options and make sure that she knows what could happen, and that you just support her through whatever that looks like. I talked over one of your slides.
It's funny, we broke down slides and we're just trying to make sure we're, it's funny. Sorry, I'll just move to the next one here. So one of the things that we look at in terms of stages of change, so we really recognize that the process of change is not static, you know, that really, there has to be a readiness. And one of the things that we use as a model is the stages of change. And I'm kind of laughing because I think Tracey was going to cover this one and I was going to cover harm reduction, but that's all good. We'll laugh at that one. Anyway, so in terms of stages of change, we know that there are 7 specific stages of change that women can move through and move back and forth from. And based on a woman's conversation, based on her actions, we can begin to see where she is at in that readiness to change. And so sometimes they're in a pre-contemplative state. So basically that means they're not sure there's even an issue. I don't have a drinking problem. I'm not an alcoholic, or I don't have domestic violence in my life. So that's when they're really not recognizing that there's an issue at all. Then as a woman begins to identify some of the concerns in her life, she might get to the point of contemplating, thinking about, you know, maybe there is a problem. Maybe I'm not quite sure how to handle this. And so through these processes, and as a woman moves through these readiness to make change and move towards action to make change, the relationship of the mentor with the woman is really significant and really important. And we use a thing called a technique, as many people are probably aware of, called motivational interviewing. And basically it's really important that we look at the components of how to motivate a woman to move towards change without being directive, without being judgmental, as Tracey expressed. So one of the first things we can do is by showing empathy and really clearly, reflectively listen. So genuinely have curiosity about what's happening in the woman's life, genuinely care about what she's going through. The next part is to really help a woman begin to see the discrepancies between what she's saying and maybe what's happening in her life, and begin to start to question for herself what's going on in her world. One of the biggest things about stages of change in motivational interviewing is don't get in an argument. Don't try to convince them that their life is something when really it may not be that at all. It doesn't help to argue or push for agreement from a person. If they're not ready to hear it, then you continue to have the conversations and you continue to help them take a look at what's going on in their life. One of the other things is really, instead of coming head on with opposition, you learn to work with that resistance and understand that resistance isn't a not wanting to change. Sometimes resistance comes from fear, sorry, which I'm experiencing right now. Anyway, you know, resistance can come through in a lot of different ways, but more often than not, it's rooted from genuine either lack of understanding, lack of knowing how to make things different, fear of what the unknown is. And so really being able to support and work through that with a client is really important. One of the things, and this is a quote that we had from way back when in one of the trainings we did before there was even PCAP Council, I think, but this is my belief. It has been our experience that crisis helps build relationship. The simple act of being present, caring for another person's well-being, actively listening, and helping to find solutions is what moves a client to a place of readiness to change. So we're not the authority. We don't know more than these women. We don't have more experience than these women. These women are resilient. They're survivors. They've had probably life experiences that I will never have in my life, and they've gotten through them. So really, we can support them best to move towards change by being present and being willing to hear what their experience is. And, you know, we talk a little bit about what is self-efficacy. So basically, it's a belief in your own ability to perform tasks. And that's one of the really unique things. And we're offered this because of the fact we have 3 years to work with these women, that we don't have to have life-changing change tomorrow. Oftentimes, that's what they experience. For example, if their children are in children's services care and they're trying to work towards getting their children back, they're often given these monumental tasks to complete in 6 months and to have their life be ultimately different, or they don't have their children returned to their care. What we really recognize is that women build that sense of self and their ability with each little success that they experience. So we really help women recognize what are they doing, what is working for them, what are the little steps along the way. And part of our job is really supporting the woman to recognize what she is doing well in her life and to move forward in that. Let you carry on with this one.
I lost my mic. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. So this is the slide I was talking about a little bit earlier, where we're talking about dependence moving toward interdependence. In Seattle, there's a middle one, dependence, interdependence, and then moving towards independence. So the goal of PCAP is to move along a continuum. So from dependence on the mentor, because that's initially what you want, is to build dependence on you so that she knows she can depend on you. She knows she can count on you to be there, to drive her to an appointment, to advocate for her with a service provider. And then moving her along that continuum to a place where she's comfortable being interdependent with other people, not just you. And I think that interdependence means being, you know, independent, living independently, but knowing that everybody needs help at some point in their life, and to be okay with asking for help for whatever it is she needs at that particular time. We also need to be clear when we're working with clients who are resistant. Are they actually different, or are they defiant? So you want to be, how is your client viewing the situation that you're in the middle of? Is it Is she being defiant, or is she not understanding what it is needing to happen? She doesn't understand what the change might look like, what her life may look like after she's made a particular change. We need to make sure that we're looking at clients who are resistant, not as unmotivated, but as not ready to make a change. And it's your job as mentors to make sure she, you know, to give her the options, to show her what things she can do to make changes that she needs to make. And in particular, like Tammi said, with Children's Services, if we have a TGO or a temporary guardianship order, we might only have 3 months to make some really specific changes. So we need to be clear about what that's going to look like. So we need to look at things from the client's perspective. So diffuse the situation by avoiding an argument. There's no point in arguing. We want to first seek to understand. And so like Tammi said, stay curious. Ask what's going on for her. And it might take several meetings to figure out what that's going to look like. Make sure that you're demonstrating empathy for her situation, respect and active listening, and being neutral. It's not about choosing sides. It's about presenting all options to her and presenting all sides to her. You want to channel your energy to working positively and work towards resolving problems, not creating more problems. And I know that that can happen. When you're emotionally invested, that can be really difficult to do. But we still need to make sure that she's seeing all sides and all options available to her. So we're going to move on to harm reduction.
So the third theoretical framework that we work from is harm reduction. And I know for a lot of people in society, they don't understand harm reduction. They don't understand, why would you want a pregnant woman still using drugs or still smoking marijuana, or, you know, using less alcohol instead of no alcohol. And a lot of times there's that really rigid line drawn in the sand between what a person should be doing and what a person is able to do. And one of the things that we know in our experience is that the more we can, again, meet a woman where she's currently at, give her the supports, wrap her around with all of the things that she needs to make better choices, the more she's able to make those choices. And if we come in with a really rigid expectation of, oh, geez, you're pregnant, you better stop using everything, you can't smoke, you can't drink, you can't do pot, you can't do any of those things, that creates just an instant feeling of shame for the woman. It creates a feeling of, I can't do this, I'm such a horrible person. So we really recognize that we're going to assist, as it says on the slide, that we're working to assist these women without abstinence as a requirement. And one of the things that we work on most with our clients, believe it or not, is, please, if you've used over the weekend, call me, tell me. That's the last thing you'd want to do in a lot of situations. You wouldn't want your supports to know about you struggling. But we really talk about the fact that I can help you best if we can work through those really difficult things, even if you've relapsed. So basically, we continue to work with them regardless of what their choices are in their substance use, and we work to try to give them the supports and resources they need to make better choices for themselves over time. What a lot of people don't realize is that harm reduction actually does benefit the individual, it benefits the family, and it does benefit society as well. If we can help a woman understand even something as simple as, how do I keep my child safe if I'm going to go out and use this weekend? So instead of a woman having her child in the bedroom sleeping and she decides to use drugs and she's got friends there, if we can help her begin to understand, you know you're going to use this weekend, what can you do to keep your child safe while that happens? You help her build the resources and supports around her so that child can be in a safe place. And that woman begins to understand, you know, just because I'm not using this morning doesn't mean it's safe for me to be with my child, because I might be suffering the effects of the drug I used over the weekend. So really helping them begin to understand the impacts of the choices they're making and how they can reduce the risks and the harm of those choices. And slowly over time, what we see is that women just make more informed decisions as they move along, and often to the benefit of their family, their children, and society. What a lot of people don't realize is that they see substance use as it's just the substance use. What they don't understand is the trauma behind the substance use, or the lack of stability in their life. Simply, for some of these women, they might be 22 or 23 years old. They've never had a job, period, ever. They've left school sometimes, in grade 8 or 9, and not had a typical normal sort of development. And so there's a lot of things behind the substance use. And we really recognize in the PCAP model of work that by addressing those key issues, those core needs, you begin to support a woman to be able to make better decisions around her substance use. The other thing, we've talked a lot about it, the relationship, but it really is about respectful, coordinated approach to service. And so that's really what that means to me, is that helping the other service providers and people in this woman's life begin to understand the importance of harm reduction. So sometimes we're educating. The role of the mentor out in the community is helping people develop a broader understanding of what the unique challenges of the women that we work with are, and helping them to understand different ways of engaging with them that can support them to make the changes that they need to. And on the bottom of the slide, it talks about it. Harm reduction is seen as controversial in a lot of places. People don't like the idea of it. They don't want a harm reduction approach in their communities. And for me, that's because they're not fully understanding exactly what harm reduction can do and how it can move a woman towards positive change. There's a link here on the bottom for an article or a booklet on harm reduction in pregnancy. It's a great resource, so I encourage you to take the time and take a look at that. The other really important thing, it's not necessarily a theoretical framework, but we've really recognized the importance of trauma-informed care. And it's really important as an organization to really understand that when people have dealt with severe trauma, when they've had lots of grief and loss, that oftentimes entering into service providers and systems, they're re-traumatized. And it's not that they're meaning to do that, but the simple barriers of getting, for example, Alberta Works or income. They go into Alberta Works and they're 5 months pregnant and they're substance using, and the expectation is you're employable. You should be able to work. We're not going to give you benefits until you're in your 3rd trimester. And I'm not trying to get political. I'm just trying to help people understand that trauma-informed is really important. So if you have a woman who's homeless, who's being victimized by the people around her, who is using substances to cope with severe trauma, doesn't have a phone number, and you tell her, no, we can't give you income because you're not in your 3rd trimester yet, you're employable. Is that woman really employable? Is that trauma informed? So it's really part of our job is helping people understand, housing is another one. We have women that struggle in housing. So we might support them, work with them, get them into housing, but they've never had a place of their own. They've never paid rent. They've never taken care of responsibilities on a day-to-day basis. They've never had to make tough choices on a really limited income. And so it gets them into lots of hot water with all kinds of people, the utilities, the cell phone providers, the landlord. And it's really about educating people around them to understand how we can be more informed and supportive of these women and where they're at in their lives. So it's, again, as an agency, it's really important that you start to explore ways that you can be more trauma-informed. Look at it in your policies, look at it in terms of your day-to-day practices, and find ways to make sure that you're not re-traumatizing the women based on your response to them. And a really good example of that, it kind of makes me laugh, but as a supervisor and as a mentor, we know we probably get fired 5 or 6 times in a year by a client because they're frustrated. They don't want to work with us, or whatever, they're frustrated by the system. And so they say, you're not doing anything for me, so why am I working with you? Well, be to say, well, fine, you don't want to work with us. There's 15 other women that are in need of our services, so we'll close your file and we'll move on. something as simple as that re-traumatizes women. You know, it's like really important that they recognize we're in it, we believe in them, we support them, and we're going to work through the difficulties. And that is an example of trauma-informed care, is being willing to work through those really tough times with clients versus just saying, okay, good, you're resistant, we'll move on. In terms of, this slide is pretty self-explanatory and looking at trauma-informed. It's like being really sensitive and understanding what might be the triggers for these women. So what are things, you know, funny things, like we had a client one time that she kept reacting to her mentor, was really angry with her all the time. And it was through conversation and trying to work through that difficult relationship that we realized she reminded her, this client, of her mother, and that was a traumatic thing. So just that physical appearance or some of what that woman was saying triggered in her a trauma and a childhood experience that she couldn't get over. So we had to work through that and find ways to overcome that. And really, I think what's so important is really truly acknowledge what has happened to the client, believe them, don't judge them, don't say, I can't believe that, that's unbelievable. Believe what they're saying and help them to understand that really what has happened to them is bad or what they've experienced is bad, but they're not bad people. They're genuinely caring, wonderful people that have had really bad experiences in their lives. I already talked about that. Respond to their disclosure, believe them, validate them, help them to know that someone out there listens, acknowledges, and cares. And it just goes on from there. We really use a strength-based perspective, so we really believe in recognizing and acknowledging all of the things that the woman has in her own life that are positive and moving forward in that.
So we want to talk now, moving a little bit more into initial considerations, and is PCAP a good fit for your community? The cool thing about PCAP in Alberta, like Tammi said, is that it can be adapted to fit your community, and I love that about the Alberta PCAP program as opposed to the Seattle PCAP program, which is a good program. It's just very, very rigid. I feel like one of the most important things about finding out whether or not your PCAP is a good fit for your community is ensuring that some really good community development has been done to make sure that the community is ready to accept you, to be so that you can make them more knowledgeable about what PCAP is, how it serves women, how you know, it uses a harm reduction approach and a relational theory approach, and really build good collaborative partnerships with other community agencies and stakeholders, so that you know that there's going to be a good fit. And you're going to come up against resistance and challenge, because there are people that don't believe in the things that we do. They don't believe in harm reduction. They don't believe in, you know, the 3-year program, the fact that we're women focused. That can be difficult for some people to see, and so those are some barriers that you're going to have to overcome. But you want to do that in building trust with those collaborators, so that so that they trust that you're doing the right thing. And then you want to make sure that you find a good host agency. So the host agency that understands the work of PCAP, understands that it's a harm reduction, not an all or nothing program, that you're providing services to super high-risk families. And you're going to hit challenges there too. There are going to be agencies that have not done this in the past, and or their focus has always been children and not families. So it's going to take some work to get through those issues, those initial issues. So some of the strategies about introducing PCAP to the community are to go to your local interagency group and make sure that you're getting your name out there, getting your face out there. You want to be recognized in the community, so the best way to do that is to get out there and meet people. Offer short presentations. I remember Audrey's favorite thing was take coffee and donuts. Always take coffee and donuts. They love it. Get out there, get in with supervisors, make sure, again, getting your face out there, talking about PCAP, talking about, pardon me, the research relating to the success of PCAP and what it looks like for Alberta. You want to maybe invite all the frontline workers that you've worked with or that you think you might work with, and agency administrators to like a PCAP day, so that you can talk about it there. Open houses. Make sure that you are always carrying thank you notes that you can drop off and plenty of brochures that are current. You need to make sure that that's happening. Get booths at health fairs, service fairs. As many places as you can get yourself out there is where you want to get your face out. And the recruitment of clients needs to be ongoing throughout the time that you're trying to get people to buy into PCAP. And that includes host agency recruitment and client recruitment, because as long as you're out there and being active and connecting in the community, more and more service providers will know who you are, and you'll build better relationships, and that will be helpful for ongoing service collaboration. Pardon me. Maybe I'm nervous. So, budget. This is probably the crux of the issue for a lot of host agencies is the budget. You want to, we're looking, the slide is pretty self-explanatory, so you need to give consideration to your setup, what your salaries and benefits are going to look like, your personnel services, which means extensive personnel training or employee training, other contractual services that you'll need, like insurance, utilities, postage, printing, those kinds of things, and then travel. Travel is probably the biggest sticker for a lot of sites, and we're going to get into that, I think, in bigger detail in the next slide or so. And then you've got to be looking at, whether or not you're going to be able to offer client stipends, things such as, if a client runs into a situation where they have no milk for their baby or no diapers for the baby, are you going to be able to do that? I'm not saying it's something that you need to do every day. I'm saying that sometimes it happens. Costs for travel, mentor costs, training costs, these are all essential to the program. So some of the common questions that we've come across in training is, why is the travel budget so important? Well, particularly in rural communities, there is not an availability of public transportation like there would be in, say, Calgary or Edmonton, or I think Lethbridge even has public transportation. When you're moving clients, when a client has an ultrasound appointment and no way to get there, we can't just walk away and say, well, sorry, I can't help you because I'm not allowed to drive you. That really doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't really build relationship. It doesn't build trust. It's important to be able to get clients to these really important appointments. Oftentimes, I've had it happen where a client didn't show up for several appointments, so had a bunch of charges at a doctor's office, and then when she showed up to deliver her baby at 40 weeks, the doctor was angry with her that she hadn't been there. Well, she hadn't been there because she couldn't afford to pay the fines for missing a doctor's appointment. She missed the doctor's appointment because she didn't have transportation to the doctor's appointment. So it's kind of like a catch-22 situation. We need to make sure that supervisors and managers understand the importance of the travel budget. I know that it happens occasionally where people are traveling so much that by, February or March, you're on travel restrictions because there's no money left in the budget. And you need to do whatever it takes to make sure that that doesn't happen, because the only person who loses out when you're on travel restrictions are clients. So whether that means having one in-office day a week to save some money towards the travel budget, whatever that's going to look like for you. What if my agency is resistant to allowing mentors to transport clients? I have not come across that directly. I have heard it in PCAP trainings. I don't understand why you would want to have a PCAP program if you're not allowed to transport the clients. Again, it's about building self-efficacy. I understand that it sounds like enabling when you're moving a client from place to place to place and you're not a taxi driver, but it is important for her to get health care. It's important for her children to get health care, dental care. Those things are critical to her success and well-being. You know, people's mental health and physical health goes hand in hand, and if you can't address the needs that she has for her physical health, how are you going to ever get her to address the needs she has for her mental health? As far as transporting client partners, some agencies will say absolutely not, and some agencies will say yes, as long as you have a transportation consent signed by that partner. I feel like there are going to be times where if you're going to an ultrasound and she's still involved with her partner, her client's still involved with her partner, she may want her partner there. And I think if you have a really good, honest conversation with her, you can assess the risks, whether or not there are risks. If he's a safe person to have in your vehicle, then, you know, have a conversation, mentors and supervisors, to make sure that you're doing the right thing and that you're safe. It is PCAP's foremost goal that mentors keep safe. If you want to have a look at how things are done at UW and all of Washington, actually, these are the two websites you can look at. The pre-implementation checklist, these are literally a huge, just a huge list of things that Dr. Grant would want you to look at. And then the fidelity assessment, which will make you have a look at how you can maintain fidelity to the program while building your site. Miss Tammi.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the PCAP structure itself and caseloads and managing caseloads. So generally speaking, a full PCAP site would have 6 mentors and a full-time supervisor. And then usually there would be, depending on the agency, whether there's a manager or a director, the levels above the supervisor and the mentor really is dependent on the agency itself and what their structure is. What is most significant, though, is taking a look at what is a reasonable caseload for a mentor. And sometimes, again, in a world where caseloads are often very high and there's your expectation to have a lot of clients, sometimes people ask, what is a normal caseload for a PCAP program? And often they'll ask, why is that number so low? So generally speaking, in Alberta, what we recommend is that a mentor would have 12 active clients and up to 3 clients that are inactive or that they're pursuing. So for a maximum of 15 clients. That number really is dependent on so many things, though, and this is probably where the supervisor's role becomes most important. There's a lot of things that are factors that play into how a caseload is managed. For example, a new mentor just starting in on the program, it would be overwhelming to expect them to have 15 clients right away, because more often than not, they're going to have new clients. And what our experience is, when women come into the program, that first 6 months, even up to a year, is intensive work. Sometimes you're seeing that client 3 or 4 times a week. You're dealing with all the basic needs. You're dealing with housing. You're dealing with funding. You're dealing with the pregnancy and medical stuff. Oftentimes you're dealing with legal stuff as well. You might be supporting them to deal with probation or outstanding warrants and charges. Oftentimes you're supporting them in dealing with children's services. So a woman entering into the program requires a lot of support from the mentor. The idea is, over the 3 years, their need for that intensive work does reduce as the woman becomes more confident, more willing to do things for herself, is more trusting of the people around her. the mentor is not needed as much in terms of those things. So to expect a new mentor, learning the community, learning the role, to have 15 new clients would be just overwhelming. So part of what generally or naturally happens over time is, for example, in my agency, I'll give a little bit of an example of that. When we have a new staff come on in First Steps, there's a fair amount of intensive work that's done around training. So there's a lot of training around understanding addiction support, your core trainings like first aid and suicide prevention or assist programs. There's the 3-day PCAP training, which we try to get them into, hopefully within the first 6 months of them starting at their job. So there's a fair amount of training. Motivational interviewing is another one, if we can get them into the first level 1 of motivational interviewing. There's a fair amount of training that really is best if it can be done in that first year of work in the program. As well as that, they're taking on, as I said, new clients, and so usually they're clients that are in high need. So how we started off is usually within the first 3 months, they're working with 3 to 4 clients. We don't like them to start with less than that, because if you only have 1 or 2 clients, then the clients become used to you being able to just respond whenever they're needing, and that creates lots of difficulty. The idea is over the year, we build them up to the 12 to 15 clients by the end of that first year in the program. So by 8 or 9 months, for example, our new staff would be hopefully having a caseload of 7 or 8 clients, and understanding there is a fair amount of administrative work that goes. Each agency has its own expectations around administrative work. But we'll talk a little later about it. We also, in PCAP, have a fair amount of administrative paperwork that we do in regards to our database. And so there's a lot of stuff for them to learn in that first year. What happens over time with a caseload is it naturally progresses. And so you're taking on 2 or 3 new clients at a time, perhaps. And so you end up over the 3 years with clients that are in different stages of need. And so you can handle a caseload of 12 to 15 normally. So when we talk about, I'll just describe a little bit about what an inactive client means. As Tracey said, women don't get kicked out of program or out of the PCAP model work, and we also don't generally close files. We actively pursue women. So unlike a lot of other services, if a woman doesn't show up for counseling and she doesn't show up for 2 or 3 times, then that's the end of it. There's no more appointments booked. In PCAP, we actively try to find these women. We jokingly call it friendly stalking, but that's really not a good description, but it is part of what we do. When they first come into the program, we ask, who are the people you would reach out to if you're struggling? We do drop-bys of houses if we don't have phone numbers. We might call the last 3 numbers that they've given us to see if they still have contact with those people. So we actively try to engage these women because we know that trust is a big deal. And oftentimes, when they need us the most is when it's hardest for them to reach out. So, you know, we do actively pursue women for, in the Washington model, basically a file is left open for the entire 3 years. In Alberta, generally speaking, because of where we're at in our demand, we will pursue women for up to 6 months usually. So for the first 3 months, we will actively, weekly send her text messages, send her emails, call people she knows, drive by places they might have been, actively pursue trying to re-engage with the woman. From the 3 to 6 month, if we have had no luck and all those means are exhausted, we'll still keep a file open in case the woman comes back and we re-engage with them. And sometimes, even if a woman comes back a year later and says, hey, I'm ready to work, we will re-engage with them. We really see the value of staying connected to that woman. So that's what an inactive client would look like. That would be, you know, 3 clients on your caseload that are not connecting as regularly, that you're needing to do more work to connect with. In terms of the PCAP supervisor, we're going to get into a little bit more about the roles, but it really is, it's a very engaged job as a supervisor, because this is work with really women living in high traumatic situations, it's high risk work, the supervisor almost on a daily basis is getting phone calls or having staff check in with them about a situation that's come up. And it's not a static job. As a mentor as well, it's kind of funny. I look to Tracey and she looks to me, but it's like you might start your day or your week on Monday thinking you're going to be doing this, and by Monday afternoon your whole week is upside down based on what the current issue is or what the need is. And so mentors become really flexible, and the supervisor along with that needs to be able to be really responsive. And if for whatever reason the supervisor is not available, there needs to be a good backup person that can respond to those needs as required. I think I've answered half of these questions already. But, you know, really in terms of the actual caseload, like I said, it's intensive work. It's work that requires a lot of hours. As Tracey was saying, simple things like transportation, that one of our key jobs is to help these women become more effectively connected to their resources. And one of the ways we do that is by helping them get to those resources until they feel confident, until they feel safe. So sometimes the mentor might have to pick that woman up for the first 3 or 4 probation meetings and take her to that probation meeting and wait outside of that meeting and have conversation with her after that meeting so that we can support her to be on track. And eventually the hope is, and what usually happens is they get to the place that, okay, that's not so bad. I can meet that probation officer, and if I have problems, I can talk to you about it after. So it really is work that can require a lot of time. The other part of it is that in terms of face-to-face contact time, the target is usually around 65% of the mentor's time is direct face-to-face with the client, and the balance of that is spent on training, on supervisions, on paperwork and things like that. And a big part of that 35% is actually just simply resourcing. The amount of time it takes sometimes to find a resource to meet a woman's need can be monumental, right? So in terms of should mentors aim to have exactly 15, absolutely not. There's nothing rigid about numbers. And if your expectation is every staff is going to have 15 clients no matter what, you're going to do your clients a disservice and you're going to do your mentors a disservice. It's intense work, and it's an ongoing conversation between the supervisor and the mentor looking at who's on her caseload. For example, if we have a mentor that has 2 or 3 women that have been confirmed to have an FASD, we know that it's going to be double the work. So those 3 clients actually equals the work of 6. So that mentor couldn't have 15 clients and still effectively do the job that they're doing. We take a look at when a supervisor is sort of managing caseloads, some of the things that I look at is what's the experience of my mentor? How well informed is she of the resources in the community? What's her confidence level? How much training does she need? And or sometimes it's even something as simple as work-life balance. What's going on for her overall that she's going to be able to be in the best frame of mind to do the work that she needs. So it's a very fluid kind of thing. And like I said, sometimes a caseload might have 9, sometimes a caseload might have 15, and it changes all the time. I think I already talked about the other one in terms of a new mentor that in terms of our program, and I think that's generally the experience across the province, is we try to build mentors up to a full caseload. And we already talked about that one too. Boy, I talked about all these questions in the middle of what I was saying. Sorry. In terms of tracing, I talked a little bit about this already in terms of the things that we do to try to stay engaged with these women. So one of the things that we do is, for example, when a woman comes into the program, part of our intake process is we actually ask the question, who are 4 people or who are some people that you stay in contact with no matter what's going on for you? So who are the people you would reach out to even if you're relapsing? And surprisingly enough, the women get it. They understand, yeah, when I'm really in trouble, it's really hard for me to reach out. And so they generally are willing to give us the name of 2 or 3 people that we might be able to reach out to. What becomes a little sad sometimes is the number of women that really don't have a reliable person, and their backup is might be their social worker, might be their probation officer, you know, whatever. So we do try to get as much information as we can in the beginning of ways to be able to contact that woman. The other things we do is we keep track of all the previous addresses and phone numbers. And we kind of laugh because in our files, the staff have to put a new face sheet on every time there's an address change. And with our clients, sometimes they might have 20 address changes in a year. But it's surprising how much information that can give you in terms of, was that a cousin, was that an uncle, was that an aunt? And the clients from the beginning understand that we will go above and beyond what a lot of other people will do to stay engaged. So, you know, it's not like it's really a threat to them to give and share that information. They actually often appreciate the fact that we will reach out to them. Some of the other things we do in terms of tracing or tracking down clients, if we haven't been able to get a hold of them through texting and emailing and phone calls, or if the phone's been disconnected, we'll do simple things like drive by their last known address and leave a card. And just saying, hey, haven't heard from you for a little while, hope you're doing okay, give me a call. Surprising how many calls we get from a simple card left behind. And one of my favorite stories is from Ashley Baxter, actually, at Bissell, and she talked about literally for 6 months, she went by this client's house, and the client was never home. She would hang a bag of 3 or 4 diapers on her doorknob with a little note saying, hey, thinking about you, hope everything's okay. And she did that repeatedly. A couple times a month, she would leave this bag of diapers and a little note on this client's door, hoping she was getting the message. Well, one day, Ashley didn't take the diapers because she thought, okay, it's been 6 months. I guess I'm going to just let this go. Sure enough, the woman calls her, someone stole my damn diapers. You know, what's happening? You know, and it's funny. And that was a laughable moment, but it was a moment of engagement. And from that point on, that woman knew that Ashley cared enough to go there every week for 6 months or every couple of weeks for 6 months. So that's the level of tracing that we will do with clients. And sometimes people think that's a bit odd, but we know that that's what it takes to engage with these women that have had such trauma and such difficult life experiences, that they really need you to demonstrate that you truly, genuinely care about them.
So some of the mentor job requirements. Pretty obvious here, transportation of clients and their children, you know, making sure that you're providing outreach services to connect clients to their agencies. And I know that it's probably going to come up later, but the biggest part of a mentor's job, and we've had this feedback, is most often making sure everybody else is doing their jobs, keeping all those people connected. If it means that you're doing case conferences, then do the case conferences. It just keeps everybody on the same page, and it keeps everybody accountable, just to make sure that you know what you're doing. So the biggest part of the job is driving, making sure that you have a valid driver's license with a clean abstract, because you're going to be in your car 2 or 3 hours a day, unless you're really remote up there by Paddle Prairie and things like that. That'll be longer, guaranteed. Transporting children, which means that you're going to need to be able to lift. And I have a pretty funny story, but I'll skip over that. Sometimes you're not able to lift, you drag in the snow. You do what you have to do. Carrying groceries, taking clients for groceries, moving clients' personal belongings many times. So you need to be able to lift up to about 14 kilograms or 30 pounds. So you have to make sure that you're doing all the required paperwork, so the client paperwork, the administrative paperwork that's attached to your agency and to PCAP. And make sure that you know that that your mentors have the ability to manage up to 15 clients, and stay on top of that. So if that means doing file checks, things like that, to make sure that they're up to date, there's really not a good way to do that. I believe that that's the way you need to do it. Managing the family, all their service providers, that's going to take up a big part of your time. And then making sure that you're documenting The thing about documenting in a timely manner is that once you have it written down, you're able then to let go of that part of whatever's going on with that client's life until you need to come back to it another time. If you don't write it down right away, then you're having to remember it, which means that you're carrying that around, and that can create some vicarious trauma or compassion fatigue, and you don't want to be doing that. According to PCAP, Washington, it takes about 8 to 10 hours a week to complete your paperwork at a desk. So writing, making calls, doing your notes, and computer data entry. So the supervisor's job requirements is Tammi.
It's kind of funny because both Tracey and I could speak to the mentor role and the supervisor role because we've both been frontline mentors and supervisors, and so it's kind of fun. I feel like I've done it all. Anyway, in terms of the role of the PCAP supervisor, I've talked a little bit about that already in terms of the importance of supporting your staff with their caseloads. One of the unique things about Alberta is there's a big difference between the size of sites. So sometimes sites are very remote and there might only be 1 or 2 workers and there isn't actually a supervisor there. So a mentor would be doing some of the roles of a supervisor and the person overseeing them might be 3 hours away. And that's actually a common occurrence in Alberta. So for example, we have supervisor out of Edson. She lives in Edson, but she's supervising people in Hinton and in Grand Prairie and a wide variety of places. So sometimes those initial duties like screening of referrals and doing intakes have to be done by the mentor because the supervisor just simply isn't in the vicinity to be able to do that. But in a normal, typical setting, the referrals would be screened by the supervisor and they would be part of the intake process. In Edmonton, we adapted that, and that's the beauty of PCAP in Alberta, is that I found as a supervisor, I had so much time spent trying to track down people to do intakes that it was overwhelming. And so we've adopted a model where we have an actual intake worker, and we work closely together, and she's the one that does the initial paperwork and makes sure they meets criteria and signs consents. And then we go on, and as a supervisor, one of the really important roles you have is to complete the Addiction Severity Index interview or intake interview. And we'll talk a little bit more about Penelope and our database as we go along, but that's a really important interview that we do with women as they're coming into the program. It's intense. It takes about 2 hours to complete, but it gives us a really clear, it's a series of questions we ask all women entering into the program in the province. And so there's a consistency across programs. This is one of the things that we do keep consistent. And it really helps us to understand a little bit about what their life history is. What are the events that have occurred in their life? What has brought them to the place that they're at as they enter into the program? And it helps to shape some of the work that we do with the women initially coming in. The other thing that it does, and I'll talk more about it in a bit, is it really helps us understand in the province what are common struggles that women are dealing with. So basically the supervisor would do the intake interview. One of the most important jobs, as I've already talked about, is the supervision of your mentors. And again, as Tracey said, that's had to be adapted to meet the different community needs. So supervisors have gotten really creative. Sometimes they're doing mandatory teleconferences with all their mentors. So mentors are all in different areas, but once a week they're calling in and they're having a teleconference call. Sometimes supervisors are alternating between a web supervision or like using Zoom or some of those other technologies and face-to-face. But in the wintertime, some of these locations, travel is just not safe for supervisor or mentors, so they have to rely more heavily on some of those other resources. So we get creative in Alberta and we do what we need to do to make sure that our staff are feeling supported and well supervised. The other thing that, and I've learned this over the years as a supervisor, is facilitating meaningful and purposeful meetings, staff meetings. There's nothing that I've experienced my staff hate more than to feel like they're wasting their time. So if we have a mandatory monthly staff meeting and we're going to get together and we're talking about a whole bunch of nothing, it's frustrating for them because there's other things they'd rather do. So it's really important for you as a supervisor to find ways to engage your staff, to keep them involved in those staff meetings, and to help them understand the importance of connecting as a team. For example, what we've done again in our Edmonton program, we recently changed locations and our office space has become a little more corporate, so it's not as relaxed as our last office space was. So what we've started to do is, instead of having a staff meeting every 2 weeks, we have a staff meeting, a formal staff meeting once a month. But every Friday afternoon at noon, from noon till 1, we just get together. We debrief, we talk about the week, we talk about what the stressors have been, we talk about whatever's important for them that week. And what I'm finding is at the end of the Friday, they're happy to go home and they've let some of that pressure and weight go from them. So being really paying attention to the staff meetings and the purpose of what you're doing with them is really important. I think it's funny that we have this under the role of the supervisor, but Tracey and I have talked about the fact that establishing the PCAP identity in the community and soliciting referrals is not just the responsibility of the supervisor, that it truly, the mentors out in the community are the ones that are representing our program, building relationships. And so we see that as a really important job for both the supervisor and the mentor. And one of the things I've learned over the years is you kind of make the assumption that people know you out there and they're going to make referrals. You can kind of get in the rut after 2 or 3 years of assuming people know that you're out there, and all of a sudden you're not getting referrals and you're wondering why. Well, it's because there's been staff turnover in resources and places like that, and people simply, the new staff, don't know you exist, right? So as Tracey said earlier, that's an ongoing important role, is to stay connected in your community, attend network meetings if you can do that, be part of things like homelessness initiatives, or find ways to stay engaged with your community. And then there's all the typical things like the paperwork, making sure that the files are up to date, and making sure that the Penelope data is being collected and input into the system. So, you know, it's a job that it's pretty all-encompassing, and the week flies pretty quick. So I won't go through all the details, but basically there's a lot of specific things, but I think the most important role of the supervisor is the support of their mentors and staying in touch with where the women themselves are at. Okay, I think I've talked about a few of these already. I've talked about the importance of supervision. I will go a little bit more into detail about that one. One of the things, because we work with these women very intimately for up to 3 years, it can be, there's a lot of vicarious trauma. These women often are sharing some very difficult life experiences. And even though the mentor's not experiencing them themselves, the telling of that story, the hearing of that story can be very traumatic. And so it's really important that the supervisor creates an atmosphere that isn't just about, are your files up to date? Do you have your timesheet in? Is your mileage done? It's much more about supporting them to process some of what they're experiencing in just simply doing the job that they're doing. It's really critical that that support is there. This is a common question we get at trainings, or comments. Sometimes it's not even a question. Supervisors will say, well, I see my staff every day. They're dropping in my office, and I always know what's going on, so we don't need to do supervision. And what we really work on in training is to help supervisors understand that's not supervision. That staff coming in and keeping you up to date is important. It's critical. It shapes the way the week will go for the mentors and for the clients. But staff need a dedicated amount of your time sitting there talking about what's important to them about their caseload. And I agree, the weekly supervision is something we've not been able to meet in terms of the standard that Seattle might have. But at minimum, I work really hard to try to have supervision every couple of weeks with my staff. And on top of the face-to-face one-on-one supervisions, as an agency, we've done a collaborative meeting where some of our other FASD program staff get together with our staff and they take turns presenting cases. So, you know, really, and then we have staff meetings. So really there's at least one thing every single week where mentors are connecting and supporting and being able to debrief and work through some of what they're experiencing. I think I've already talked about the other one around getting creative in remote areas. There's a lot of creativity. One of the things we have, and I don't think we have it on our websites, but we do have a monthly supervisors call, teleconference call. And that's a great opportunity for supervisors to get together, have conversation, and ask questions. So if you're ever not sure how to handle something in terms of your role as a supervisor, there's a lot of ways. You can call one-on-one to other supervisors in the province. You can join the teleconference call. You can also put forward a call to or an email to the PCAP Council, and if they can't answer the question, they'll find someone that can. So there's lots of supports for supervisors out there in terms of doing their job. Okay.
We're just going to briefly go over releases of information and what that looks like. So when you're doing a release of information, you need to show the ROI or the release of information to the client, read the release of information to the client, explain the purpose. Say, I'm asking you to sign this so that I can talk to other service providers about how best to help you. It doesn't mean that I'm going to tell them everything. It just is about, so I'm able to tell them how well you're doing and how well we're moving forward. The biggest thing here is that blanket ROIs, so releases of information that cover a whole bunch of agencies on one page, are not okay. And they're not okay because, say for example, you went to your doctor and he said, okay, I'm going to send you for an x-ray, but then I'm also going to refer you for an MRI, and then I'm going to also send you for some blood work. But here's a release of information, and I'm going to put this on. I'm going to put the x-ray department, I'm going to put the MRI department, I'm going to put the lab, all on this ROI, and they'll all have access to all your information. Yeah, I don't think that's okay. So for every service provider, there must be a distinct release of information on file. So if you have 50 service providers, then you should have 50 releases of information. So I just want to make sure that we're clear about that. We need to be super clear about boundaries. Make sure that you know what addictions, treatments, or options are available in your community. Learn all you can about addiction, the family roles, the consequences for family members, because addiction doesn't just affect the addict, it affects everyone around them. So you want to make sure that you're familiar with what all the things that can happen. You need to remember that, you need to remember that addiction and mental health very often go hand in hand. And we know that trauma is a huge back factor for addicts, and know that addiction becomes a coping skill. So you need to make sure that if you're looking at co-occurring disorders such as mental health and addiction, making sure that you're using a trauma-informed approach. Be clear that you know that you're not judging her for her past trauma, but that you're willing to support her to figure out a way to move forward and not, re-traumatize her. And don't underestimate the benefits of 12-step groups. I know that we talk a lot about AA is not really good for women or NA is not really good for women, but we've had really good success with AA and NA and our clients, and I think that it wouldn't hurt to try it. It's not all about you, it's about what's going to work for her and trying things that will work for her. So, training. There is a lot of training that is essential to the PCAP model, and that means, and it's going to vary based on what people are coming to the agency with and what the individual agency's capacity is to give training. Core training is essential, and it's all training is essential to the ongoing competency of mentors and of supervisors. So it makes sense for us all to keep learning and making sure that we're up to date on what's available to us and what's upcoming. There's also, each individual agency will have standardized requirements, and so we need to make sure that you're meeting all those standardized requirements as well as meeting what the PCAP protocols are. So there's the PCAP core training that's ensures that people have a good understanding of the protocols and the theories and the model, and then there's on-job shadowing that's really important. And I know that if it wasn't for Lethbridge, I wouldn't have gotten any on-job shadowing, so thanks, Lethbridge. The key training, we have broken down training into these three kind of models. So there's the key training, PCAP training, key training, and then suggested training. And Tammy's going to talk to you about the training.
Sort of our confused moments.
We did.
That's okay. Yeah, that's all right. Anyway, in terms of the thing we'll talk mostly about today is the mandatory training in terms of the model itself. So probably about 5 years ago, I think, I'm losing track of the timelines, but the PCAP Council worked with Dr. Grant to be able to train trainers right here in Alberta. And part of that was to try to be able to more consistently provide training opportunities for people doing frontline PCAP work. And you know, it's kind of interesting. I did PCAP for 5 years before I ever had a formal training on PCAP because it just simply didn't exist in the province, and we weren't able to, as an individual agency, bring Dr. Grant up. So the first training I actually had on PCAP was, I was fortunate enough to be invited, and our programs were invited down to Calgary because Calgary's PCAP program had arranged for Dr. Grant to come up. So I think one of the best things that's occurred in our province in terms of creating a standardized method of practice is we now offer these core trainings, which are 3-day trainings on the PCAP model itself, and they're offered usually twice a year. We try to offer them in Edmonton as well as Calgary. We also have done some one-off things where they just recently did a trip specifically to Lethbridge because their program budgets didn't allow for travel. So really, I think as a supervisor, it's important that you work to get your staff registered and attending that core training as quickly as possible. Another training that we have in terms of mandatory training is the Addiction Severity Index. And so I referred to that briefly in terms of that's part of the data that we collect as being part of a PCAP program. And there is a 2-day training that's done for supervisors or anyone that's implementing the ASI. And it's really important, again, to take that training, to fully understand it is a research tool, it is a therapeutic tool, and that training really helps you understand the purpose of what that is, how to administer it, how to properly document what you're gathering in information, which all feeds into the relevance of the research and things that we're hoping to do within our province. So those are the two mandatory trainings. It's the ASI and the core. Annually, though, the PCAP Council often hosts things like mentor days and, when possible, supervisors' days. So I think as a supervisor, it's really important to kind of stay in touch with the Alberta PCAP Council, follow the monthly newsletters, be aware of when those trainings happen. Oftentimes, the training themselves are free, and we bring in some excellent guest speakers. We just had our AGM, and we had Alana Peters there for the day. So they're great opportunities to attend training, and usually it's just the cost of the travel that gets you there. But again, some really great opportunities. And Tracey already talked a little bit about priority training and recommended training. So there's a comprehensive list, I believe, in the manual or updated list. Your handout, there we go, because we do update it based on what's available. I think some of the challenges that programs face, especially in remote communities, is sometimes the training that we're recommending or see as a priority just simply isn't available in your community. And it's too cost prohibitive sometimes to have staff attend those. So I think just recognizing that these are ideals and targets, and as best as possible, try to meet them. And work within your agencies to try to negotiate how to support them. I think the biggest thing is that the mentors work in high-risk situations in the community on their own. So the better equipped they are with the tools they need to handle things day to day, the better off everyone is. So training is really a really key part of PCAP. Is this going to be you? We've lost track of our numbers. We'll just have to do a really quick little check. 49. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks for bearing with us. I think we're both a little bit on the... Yeah. So this is really high stress work. We need to be clear that supervisors are committing to maintain consistency and individual supervision meetings so that they're ensuring their staff's mental health, they're ensuring their staff's well-being, that they're practicing self-care, that they're having regular staff meetings that are meaningful and that are interactive, and they know that they have to be aware of the signs of burnout. You need to be really, really conscientious when you're meeting with your staff that you know if they're burning out. If you have a staff that's coming in and from day to day you don't understand, you don't know what's going to happen with that staff, then maybe you want to look at what the signs of burnout are. And then as a team, you want to commit to supporting one another. It's critical to the work that you do that you're well supported in your agency, that you're well supported in your team. Having team members that understand that the work that you do is critical to, avoiding burnout. That you make sure that boundaries and standards are being met. Boundaries are as PCAP mentors, you sign those boundaries. And as PCAP clients, they also sign a set of boundaries. You need to make sure that you're continuing to use those and continuing to follow those boundaries and standards. That if professional development comes up that you feel that you feel like you're lacking in a particular area, then you need to be ready to advocate for yourself with your supervisor or with your program manager to get those professional development dollars so that you can be the best mentor that you can be, and that as a mentor you're following every safety protocol that your agency requires. And if that means you're phoning in, I know that Tammi and the CSS have a new program, safety program, safety line, where they have to call in, and if they don't call in, the supervisor gets a phone call from the program. So whatever it is that you need to be doing to make sure that you're safe, you need to be doing that. And supervisors, you need to make sure that your staff are being safe. You need to, there is an extraordinarily amount of information coming at us every day with working with clients that is really difficult to hear and really difficult to process and really difficult to move through our heart. You need to make sure that you have a good team, that you're able to rely on your team to get the support that you need, that you're debriefing regularly. And I know as a supervisor, I have said to clients, if you need to call me when you're on your way home, call me on your way home and I'll take time to debrief with you. You need to do that. These terrible things that our clients have been through are not ours to carry. They're, yes, we're there to help share the burden, but we're not there to take on their burden. So you need to make sure that you're debriefing regularly and breathe. Most importantly, breathe and let go of the things that are not yours. I know that's easier said than done sometimes, and I know that, I've gone home and just wept for what a client has been through, and I get that, and that's okay. But make sure that you figure out a way to let it go. We think we're the only ones who can or will ever help our clients. Our women are survivors. They survived without us before they met us, and they will survive without us again. We need to learn to trust that the clients they know what they need, they know how to get it, and we need to just trust them back, that they'll do the right thing. And they'll do what's best for them and encourage them to do what's best for them. All right. Tammy's going to talk about some of the other client status changes.
Feeling like a little bit of a yo-yo. We didn't think this through. Yeah, so we're hoping, we have about 15 minutes left, so we're hoping to be all wrapped up. We're getting close. We did want to talk a little bit about some of the circumstances under which clients leave the program. So ideally, the client will be engaged in the program and participating for the 3-year time. But over the years, we've seen that there are sometimes that's just not necessary and not how things shape up for clients. So sometimes you get a client that's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months into the program, they're feeling okay, they're feeling supported, they feel like they've got what they need. And a client will actually ask to withdraw from the program or say, I'm not needing the support anymore. Sometimes they might not initiate that conversation, but you know, if you're starting to sense that as a program, you might be checking in with them just to see, is this still something that's important to you? What I find interesting is often when the mentors feel like, well, she doesn't really need me, doesn't really want me, the minute she asks, would you like me to close your file? It's like, no, no, I don't want you to. So just understanding there are genuinely sometimes circumstances where women feel that they've gotten what they've needed from the program, and it might only be 18 months or a year in, and that's perfectly okay. That's a successful completion of the program. It doesn't take the full 3 years to be considered successful completion of the program. We have what we call false enrollments, and basically that's a client that initially signs consents, says they're ready to work and engage in the program, but then for whatever reason in that first 6 months never follows through, doesn't really connect with the mentor, doesn't follow through with the ASI. So again, we pursue them as long as we can, as long as the numbers are still working, as long as we can send them texts and emails, we try to engage. We're not pushy about it. We just might check in once every couple of weeks. Hey, how you doing? Want to check in. But there are times we do choose to close a file within the first 6 months because the client started off wanting to be and saying they're ready to work, but then it really just is not ready to engage. We already talked kind of at length about non-active clients and how long we work with clients that are just not engaging, that we really actively pursue them. In the province of Alberta, we try to aim to do that for a minimum of 6 months and before we would close a file. And you know, some of the other reasons for leaving the program are very just simple. They move out of the area, they move to a different location. One of the really wonderful things that's happened with the expansion of PCAP in the province is there's not very many places in the province that a woman can move to where we can't connect them to another PCAP program. So that's one of the things that's happening really regularly is transferring between programs. So for example, we've had several clients that went down to Calgary for treatment and then decided they wanted to stay in Calgary. It was kind of free from the triggers of what Edmonton meant for them. So we've been successful in transitioning them to Calgary PCAP. It's kind of funny because sometimes, and I know Tracey and I have had this situation where we've had a client where it seems odd, but we've both kept an active file because the woman literally went back and forth between Lakeland and our Cold Lake and Edmonton the entire 3 years. So when she was in Edmonton, we were connecting with her. When she was in Cold Lake, they were connecting with her. The mentors kind of kept some open communication. Hey, have you seen her? If we hadn't heard from her for a while. And odd as that seems, that worked. That woman stayed engaged for the full 3 years, whereas had we closed the file because she moved to Cold Lake, we might have lost contact. So if we do transfer a client to another PCAP program, we try to give a bit of a transition period because as our experience is that the women's lives sometimes change frequently and there can be back and forth. And the same has happened with women that are sometimes living on reserve and coming to the city and moving back. There are 7 federally funded PCAP programs operating on reserves, as well as there are other programs through the province of Alberta that are also operating in some of the Indigenous communities. So it's really trying to be as flexible as we can in terms of meeting the needs of the women. Okay, I get to talk about the fun thing now. So one of the most amazing things about the PCAP model out of Seattle, Washington, is, as I started off the conversation with, is that it's based on research. So the PCAP model program actually started as a research project with ethics, and they have a really strong research team. They've implemented documentation that the woman does at intake, being the addictions severity index, and then every 6 months through the time in the program, which is called a biannual. And you know, for years and years in Alberta, we were doing that paperwork, that physical stuff, but we didn't have a database. We didn't have a way of putting it anywhere in a computer. So the work was being done, and periodically researchers would call up one of the programs and say, we'd like to do research on this particular area of aspect of working with these women, and they would have to comb through the physical documents to get the information they needed to be able to complete the research. And it was doable, but it required a lot of work from both, and commitment from the programs as well as the researchers to be able to do that. What the PCAP Council did, and again I'm losing track of all the timelines, is we actually have now implemented within our own province a database and system to be able to use the same documents that Seattle has used in their effective research, but here in Alberta. And we're still in the process of developing it. We're at the point now, I think the latest thing, we had about 600 clients entered into the database. We're now at the point of being able to generate some really clear reports that indicate how are we making a difference. So sometimes people get overwhelmed with, well, geez, that ASI interview is hard to do. Sometimes it's the difficult questions we're asking, or it's hard to stay on top of all of the biannuals. But there's real payout at the end if we do that, because Seattle has demonstrated very effectively the work that they are doing down there in Washington. And as a result of that, they've been able to sustain funding for, well, we started in, I can't remember the date it started. You know, it's over 20 years now that they've had sustained funding and growing funding, even in the States where often it's really difficult to get funding for social programs. So Penelope is our database here in Alberta. We're excited about where we're going with it. We're happy that we've had the support of the CMC and the 10-year strategic plan that have helped to fund that for us. And, you know, it's just a really important piece of what we're doing. And if there's any questions that people might have about why we do what we do, how it's all going to show up in the long run in terms of demonstrating and showing the work that we do, feel free to call anyone on the PCAP Council and they can direct you to talk to us. I'm part of what's called the Data Oversight Committee, and that's a committee with some other PCAP Council members, and we're looking at really trying to find the most effective way to do that. So one of the things that's really exciting, we had a research project that was done, I think it was for the 5-year, it might have been the 7-year evaluation. We had a team of researchers that did come in and take a look at some of our key programs that have been running for a long time. So they looked at Lakeland, they looked at Edmonton, Bissell, and CSS programs, and they were able to come up with a research paper based on the work that we're doing. And one of the recommendations that they had for us to be more effective was we were missing a window of opportunity to talk about the impact we were having. So the ASI was one document that told the story of the woman's life, but the biannual was the document that was showing progress over their 3 years. But we weren't doing a 0-month biannual, so we didn't have a snapshot of what the woman's life was like coming in. So when we looked at the 6-month, it said that 70% of the women were housed and had income, and we know that 90% of the women coming into the program don't have housing, aren't on any kind of family planning, and don't have any kind of income. So one of the changes that we've made in Alberta is the implementation of a 0-month biannual, and that was at the recommendation of the researchers that did the work for us in the strategic planning. So there's, you know, I can go on and on. As you can tell, I'm excited about the potential, mostly because I think it really helps us tell the story of these women's lives, and any way we can do that that can help to shape and influence government's understanding of what the needs are, our women are better served by that. So I'm really pretty passionate about the importance of that. There was also a study done, it might have been at the 5-year mark. It was, again, one of the strategic things, but it was taking a look at some of the work being done by PCAP, and the information is on there in terms of who the author of that was, from the Institute of Health Economics, and it clearly demonstrated, with a really low estimate of prevented alcohol-affected births, the impact of an Alberta PCAP program was over $22 million. So really understanding that the work we're doing, although it seems cost prohibitive, we work with small caseloads, in the long run the impact and the change we can have in terms of the health of our society, the health of our children, health of our families is really significant. And I think that's it. Do we have questions?
So there's one question from Emily. Can you clarify why blanket ROIs are not ideal?
I can. The rationale behind blanket ROIs not being ideal is when you send that, for example, you have to fax that ROI out to a particular agency. Often redacting or blacking out each line is not effective. All you have to do is kind of flip it over and you can see what's on there. It's just, you don't want to have to send out a release of information by fax and have then that person know every single agency they're working with. Does that make sense? It's just good practice for each agency to have their own release of information.
And we started out with a release of information that was exactly like that. So if the woman was working with AISH and they had social services involvement and income support, it was all on one release of information. But we made a determination several years ago, quite a long time ago, that again, that doesn't respect the confidentiality and privacy. If it accidentally gets faxed without that information being blacked out, then you're breaching a confidentiality. And really, it also, to me, demonstrates respect for each of the resource people that you're talking to. They're not just, oh, gee, you're one of those resources out there out of 10. The client begins to see each resource as an individual agency program person that can support them. So I think it sort of does two purposes, personally.
Perfect, and you guys covered a lot of questions through the presentation, so that's great.
Thank you. So just as a note, we thank you so much for joining us today. There is PCAP core training available in Calgary this year from October 2nd to October 4th. And for more information, you can go to the Alberta PCAP website under the training section. So, thanks again for joining us today, and stay tuned for information about our next season of FASD webcasts. To get updates and registration information about each of these sessions, please email us at fasd@gov.ab.ca and ask to be added to our mailing list. You can also find past and future webcasts at csslearningseries.ca. Today's webcast was recorded and the video will be posted online, along with videos from all the previous webcasts. The video link will be sent out to all registrants in the near future. We encourage you to share this video with anyone you think might be interested. If you had feedback about today's webcast, please email us at fasd@gov.ab.ca and let us know. You will also be receiving a feedback email from us. Please take the time to let us know what you thought of today's webcast. We'd love to hear your ideas. Have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you next time.